بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على النبي الكريم وبعد. Honorable brothers, elders and sisters, just to recap, we were talking about Bani Isra'il. We spoke about Bani Isra'il, and we said that Bani Isra'il, that they were first of all with Sayyidina Yaqub alayhi salam in Cann, then they went to Egypt. After Egypt, then they went to the desert, and they were in the wilderness of the desert with Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam and Harun alayhi salatu salam. And after the demise of Sayyidina Musa and Sayyidina Harun alayhi salatu salam, they were led by Yusha bin Nun. Sayyidina Yusha bin Nun, Joshua bin Nun, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made him the prophet, and then he led them to Jericho, to Ariha. He led them to Ariha, to Jericho, and then they remained in Jericho for a numbers of years, 200, 300, 400 years approximately they were there. And how many prophets came, Allah knows best. How many prophets came, during that time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent so many prophets. As I said to you, from Sayyidina Yaqub alayhi salam till the last prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, approximately 4,000 prophets were sent to Bani Isra'il. You can imagine how many, 4,000 prophets, only from Yaqub alayhi salam till our prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, 4,000 prophets were sent to Bani Isra'il, except for our prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who was from Bani Ismail, as you all know. Moving on, Sayyidina Yusha bin Nun, after he passed away, many prophets came, many prophets. Their names are not mentioned in the Quran, but the prophet's name that get mentioned in the Quran is Sayyidina Dawud alayhi salatu wasalam. Dawud alayhi salatu wasalam, he was very young, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned about him in the Quran that he's the one who killed Goliath. Goliath was actually the ruler of Jerusalem at that time, and he did not allow anybody to come into Jerusalem and Quds. So Sayyidina Dawud alayhi salatu wasalam with King Talut, King Saul, they fought. And Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, وَقَتَلَ دَاوُودُ جَالُوتَ وَآتَاهُ اللَّهُ الْمُلْكَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَعَلَّمَهُ مِمَّا يَشَاءُ. Three things Allah mentioned. And David killed Goliath, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him kingdom. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him kingdom, but the kingdom, the scholars have said that Allah gave him after the death of Saul, after the death of Talut, because Talut was the king. Talut was the king. Talut means Saul, he was the king. And so Dawud alayhi salatu wasalam, he became the king of Banu Isra'il when Talut passed away. وَآتَاهُ اللَّهُ الْمُلْكَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him a lot of wisdom. Wisdom is something that Allah has given to all the prophets. Every single prophet, Allah Azza wa Jal gave them wisdom. Sayyidina Dawud alayhi salam, Allah always reminds us that Allah gave him so much wisdom. Because you see, to become a king, a ruler, you need to have hikmah, you need to have wisdom. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave it to Sayyidina Dawud alayhi salatu wasalam. And Allah says, وَفَصْلَ الْخِطَابِ. Another beautiful thing that Allah gave to Dawud alayhi salam is فَصْلَ الْخِطَابِ, the final decision making in speech. Some people, they speak, they leave behind a lot of if and buts, a lot of questions. You could counterattack saying that what he said doesn't make sense, I disagree, etc. When Dawud is to make the final decision, that's the final decision. He's to cover all angles that you cannot counterattack. You can't say that I find some faults in this speech. There is no faults in the speech of Dawud alayhi salam. It made him so strong. Allah gave him the first al-khitab. His saying is the final saying. His decision is the final decision. And you just have to accept it because there isn't anything else to do. That's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised Sayyidina Dawud alayhi salatu wasalam. Our Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam praised him so many times. One Sahabi, Amr ibn al-As radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he used to stand all night in prayer and used to fast every single day. So the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam called him. He said, is it true that you stand all night in salah? He said, yes, O Prophet of Allah. You fast every day as well? He said, yes. He said, don't do that. Because this is not good for you. You are human, you're going to get very weak, and you will be neglectful towards so many other commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's very important. Our Sharia, Islamic religion teaches us balance. You can't just say that I'm going to spend the whole night in ibadah. That is not the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said to him, don't do that. Okay? To stand all night and then fast every day, it's not good for your body, it's not good for your eyes, it's not good for you. So the Prophet ﷺ told him, he said, I'll tell you what to do. My suggestion for you is that fast every 3 days a month. This is the voluntary fast. If you want to fast, 3 days a month is okay. And don't stand all night, but portion of the night. He said, Ya Rasulullah, please give me some more days to fast, because I could do more. I have the capability and strength to fast more. Rasulullah ﷺ said, in that case I will tell you, أحب الصيام إلى الله صيام داود وأحب الصلاة إلى الله صلاة داود. Immediately the Prophet ﷺ mentioned Dawud alayhi salatu wasalam. When the Prophet of Allah quotes any prophets, that's the authentic knowledge. Everything else basically is not authentic. The Prophet ﷺ said, the best fast is the fasting of Dawud, and the best salah is the salah of Dawud alayhi salatu wasalam. He is to sleep half of the night, and then he is to spend 1/3 of the night in ibadah, and sleep 1/6 of the night. Meaning the Prophet Dawud is to sleep as well, and is to also worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the night as well. As for fasting, is to fast every other day. كَانَ يَصُومُ يَوْمًا وَيُفْتِرُ يَوْمًا. So fast, for example, say you fast on Monday, don't fast on Tuesday, then fast on Wednesday, and so on and so forth. So leave one day, fast one day, don't fast the next day, fast the other day, and don't fast the following day. Yes, because that's what Dawud alayhi salam is to do, and Allah is to love this. This is better for you. So here we could understand Sayyidina Dawud alayhi salam, despite the fact Allah gave him kingdom, he was ruling Bani Isra'il. First of all, he wasn't allowed to go to Quds, Jerusalem, because King Saul, Talut, he was the king in Jerusalem. So Dawud alayhi salam, basically, he was ruling his people outside of Jerusalem. He was in Al-Khalil, which they call Hebron, where Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam is buried with Ishaq and Yaqub, and also Yusuf alayhi salam is also buried there as well. So he was there for 7 years, and then he came after 7 years when King Talut passed away. Then Sayyidina Dawud alayhi salam, he came to Al-Quds, Jerusalem, and there he ruled for another 33 years. So 33 years in Jerusalem, 7 years in total. 7 years in Hebron or Al-Khalil. In total, he ruled for 40 years. Alhamdulillah, he ruled for 40 years. But sometimes when you hear the word king and king, your mind goes to that maybe that he just had a very relaxed life, sitting here. That the Prophet of Allah reminded, no, is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala every single night and fast every single other day as well. And is to read Zabur a lot. Allah gave him Zabur. Zabur, I said to you before, Zabur has a lot of praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a lot of tasbihat and takbirat and tamjidat, glorifying Allah azza wa jal. When Dawud is to recite, then at that time, no one is to recite more beautifully than Dawud alayhi salam. Allah gave him such a beautiful voice. Once Sayyidina Abu Musa al-Ash'ari radiyallahu ta'ala was reciting Quran in such a beautiful manner. He's doing all the mudud and all the waqf properly as well. And he's reciting, pronouncing every letter, articulating every letter correctly and so beautifully. The Prophet ﷺ said, my Sahabi Abu Musa, لَقَدْ أُوتِيَ مِن مَزَامِيرِ آلِ دَاوُد. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him such a beautiful voice. His voice resembled the voice of Dawud alayhi salatu wasalam. That's the word mizmar means musical instruments. But here basically means not musical instrument. Here basically means that his voice is like when you say in English, is music to the ears. It's like you want to listen to it. That's what Abu Musa al-Ash'ari he has. But the Prophet of Allah said, he's been given the same voice of Sayyidina Dawud alayhi salatu wasalam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave hikmah and fasl al-khitab. And then in his time as well, Dawud alayhi salam, he divided his time into 4. Despite the fact that he was 40 years of king, he used to have one portion of the time for the people, to listen to everybody. One portion of the time only for his family. One portion of the time only for ibadat. And one portion of the time is to give khutbah, deliver sermons, and advise people as well. And he himself as well, Allah made iron basically softened for him, to mold. He doesn't need to melt anything. وَأَلَنَّا لَهُ الْحَدِيدَ, Allah said. We softened the iron for Sayyidina Dawud so that he could make weapons and armor. Allah Azza wa Jal gave all these beautiful, you could say, gifts and ni'mah to Sayyidina Dawud alayhi salatu wasalam. Subhanallah, despite all this beautiful praise from Quran and Sunnah, some people, they criticize Sayyidina Dawud alayhi salatu wasalam. In the biblical narration, it's such a horrible thing to say. They say, Na'udhu billah. In the biblical narration, this is supposed to be a religious book. That way, it is mentioned that Dawud alayhi salam, he was an adulterer. He was committing zina. How could you call someone a special friend of Allah? Someone who is muqtadas, that the ummah is to follow. And at the same time that you say that, he used to also commit zina as well. Some people, basically, they probably wrote all this as a reflection of their own selves. When it comes to prophets, لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله. We do not separate, disregard any of the prophets. To us Muslims, all the prophets, they receive revelation from Allah Azza wa Jal. All the prophets, they have a very high status in the eyes of Allah Azza wa Jal. All of them, they have taqwa. All of them, they have zuhud. abstain from the dunya. All of them, they always have the commandments of Allah in front of them. They don't commit sins. They never commit major sin. That's why the ulama, they say, isma, infallibility, is one of the attribute, major, very important attribute of all the prophets, alayhimu salatu wasalam. They don't commit sins. They could make errors and mistakes, but they will be the very first to tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, one thing, Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, remember when the blind person came to him, he ignored him. And he was giving time to the Sanadid of Quraysh, the leaders of Quraysh. Allah reprimanded him. Abasa wa tawalla. He frowned and he turned around and ja'ahu al-a'ma, because the blind person came to speak to him. Allah, the Prophet ﷺ, this kind of mistake could happen, but immorality, committing zina, stealing, and the thing that people disregard to be a horrible thing, Allah kept all the prophets free from that. The prophets are free from that. So how could you say Dawud ﷺ, he committed zina with a lady called Bathsheba? That is not anywhere in our narrations. Because the Prophet of Allah, he praised him all his life. He said he prayed the best salah, he had the best fasting, he had the best recitation, is to always glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says that, وَآتَيْنَاهُ الْحِكْمَةِ وَشَدَدْنَا مُلْكَهُ. We strengthened his kingdom. But the meaning, the strengthened his kingdom basically means after the death of Talut, King Saul, there was a lot of turmoil within his kingdom. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave so much strength to Dawud alayhi salam that he governed and he ruled for 33 years, 7 years before and 33 years later on, to be more precise, 40 years, alhamdulillah, he ruled, and nobody could take the kingdom away from him, because Allah made him such a good, strong king. And Allah said, وَشَدَدْنَا مُلْكَهُ وَآتَيْنَاهُ الْحِكْمَةِ, and we gave him words of wisdom, وَفَصْلَ الْخِطَابَ, and decisiveness in speech. So Allah praised Dawud alayhi salam. Ya Dawud, inna ja'alnaka khalifatan fil ard. Allah said, Dawud, we made you a khalifa on this earth. So Dawud was a chosen friend of Allah, Nabi of Allah. He was special bondman of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah made him a khalifa to call towards good and forbid others from evil. At the time of Dawud alayhi salam, it was all a peaceful kingdom. This is the very first time, by the way, I want you to remember that Bani Isra'il, they had a state in Jerusalem only at the time of Dawud alayhi salam, not before Dawud alayhi salam. This is only at the time of Dawud alayhi salam, and this has happened approximately 1000 BC. 1000 BC. Then after the death of Dawud alayhi salam, his son will come. وَوَرِثَ دَاوُدْ سُلَيْمَانَ. After the death of Dawud alayhi salam, then the one who inherited him, Dawud alayhi salam has so many children, but the Quran says only Sulaiman inherited him, because the Quran does not talk about inheritance in wealth. Quran talks about inheritance in nubuwwah. The only person who became Nabi from all the prophets of Dawud was Sulaiman alayhi salatu wasalam. How long Sulaiman ruled and what was his style of ruling, inshallah ta'ala, we'll talk about it in the next session if Allah gives us tawfiq. Ameen. Aqulu qawli hadha wa astaghfirullah.